curriculum. So it's just been really energizing, and I appreciate that the motivation that this training has given to my my camp family.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. I love the thing that I love the most about all of this that we talk about is I can't stop talking about the hidden curriculum as an idea. And it sometimes I think I stretch what it actually is, or what Sil intended it when she originally explained it to us for our camp. But like now, before we do anything, we have like hidden curriculum. We call them Hiddy Cricks meetings with our staff, where it's like we just did a big like pizza party in Philly to recruit campers, and we had a whole bunch of staff come in. I don't know, 10 staff or something like that. And we did our Hiddy Cricks meeting beforehand. It's like, all right, well, these are the expectations. And it's kind of the same as like expectations meetings like many other people have. But I think using the term hidden curriculum, or Hiddy Cricks as our slogan, is I think it gives them the permission to start doing similar things with kids. Whereas when you say like expectations, some of our like more rebellious 18-year-olds don't like, they're like, I don't want to be like all expectations with kids, even though they are setting expectations. Like it's the same thing. So Nicole, you just unmuted. Did you want to say something? Oh,
I'm good.
Cool.
That was an accident.
No stress. Well, so what I want to do today is I posted, some of you may, I'll repost it because I think you can't see the chat if you join late. So if you see it twice, well, you see it twice. But basically the agenda for today is what we just did, just kind of a quick check-in on how things are going. Then we're going to talk a little bit about like meltdowns and what happens when some of us get a lot of feelings and we're sensory overloaded, or we're overloaded in whatever, some other way. And then I really want to spend a bunch of time on how do we use some of this stuff going forward. And I think Tally said at one point that your like takeaway was like, yeah, I kind of get this stuff, but I forget sometimes that my staff don't always get this stuff, or they don't always think about it. And I think that is the truest thing for me. Is the big problem isn't that I'm not ready to do some of the stuff, and some of the stuff I'm not ready for, and I need to do some work and all that kind of thing. But way more than that is, how do I make it easier? How do I build systems to help other people start to push this further? Because no matter how much I care about anything that has to do with inclusion or creating spaces or illuminating the hidden curriculum, it really doesn't matter until I can get big chunks of my organization to move in that direction, whether that's 18-year-olds or the board or whatever. And we all have different kind of struggles on that. And so I want to kind of pinpoint where we can build like a couple of advocates in your individual organizations to kind of start moving that forward, because I think that really is where the work starts to where the rubber hits the road. Because I know you're all passionate about all this stuff, but sometimes that's just, not enough. We're just like constantly like banging our heads against the wall. Like, we need noise canceling headphones, but until maybe you need to bring in somebody like Culture City or whoever to help kind of like tip the domino over so that some other people can get on board. So I want to spend some time there. But first, meltdowns. And so I think meltdowns, when I first heard Sil starting to talk about the term meltdowns, I was like, that's not really very inclusive. Like, that's kind of like a derogatory term. I'm like, meltdowns, whatever. But how many of you have ever like been frustrated with somebody and said something kind of rude, or maybe wanted to say something kind of rude when they said something, or when, yeah, right? How many of you have huffed out of the room, like somebody said something, or like somebody did something and you just like kind of like stormed out of the room and maybe slammed the door behind you? Definitely been in that situation. Or like hit someone. I don't remember the last time I hit someone, but I sometimes want to hit people. Like, I'm like, "Rah!" And I like kind of like am about to explode and want to hit someone. I think those are all meltdowns. right? Like we all have these like little mini meltdowns, and most of us, Ryan, I'm going to include you here too. Most of us have developed like pretty good skills to manage those big feelings, right? Like that's something that we learn as we grow up, or we develop because we notice the social settings that we're in, that it's like not that effective maybe to like huff out of the room and like get all grumpy about something. But kids oftentimes, and especially kids who maybe don't have the same kind of cultural background as the majority of the people at camp, or who might have different sensory issues or different learning styles, they especially might not have those skill sets, right? So we have a bunch of kids that come to our camp who are on the autism spectrum, and they tend to melt down in kind of more seemingly like explosive ways than maybe some of our neurotypical kids. And we also have kids that come from like places where they don't have money, or the people around them don't have as much money as some other kids that come to camp, and they tend to melt down in more physical ways than some of our like more upper class kids that come to camp. And that is, you know, some of that stuff is okay, and some of that stuff is like not okay, and we have to like figure out where each of our camps land on that around zero tolerance policies, or you know, if kids do get physical, what happens. And that's like a 400-hour conversation that I would love to have with y'all, but we're not going to have right now. But I think that kind of recognizing that those actions, and helping our staff really recognize that those actions they don't tend to be like intentionally someone is trying to hurt someone, but it tends to be kind of like your anxiety is overcome and we like melt down. Because when you got angry and huffed out of the room or said something that you didn't mean to say, or kind of regretted later, at least for me, that doesn't tend to be because of the one thing that was said. It tends to be that I didn't get enough sleep the night before, I'm hungry, I've been kind of annoyed because there's something else going on, and finally am like filling up my anxiety cup, and it just totally overflows because one last little drop drives me over the edge, right? And I think that's what happens with kids most of the time too. Like, and that Sil talked about this at the beginning of this month, that one way to reduce some of that anxiety is to kind of ahead of time try and illuminate the hidden curriculum for kids, so they're not using all their coping skills trying to figure out how to navigate through a space. They're using some of those coping skills to kind of be like, okay, well, Devin said something to me that was like a little bit off, but I can like work through it because I have a bunch of coping skills left. And so we can do a lot of that. I mean, that's what the hidden curriculum, that's what illuminating the hidden curriculum, that's why I think it's the best kind of like behavior prevention, like negative behavior prevention tool that we have, so we don't get into what to do in meltdowns. But sometimes meltdowns happen. And for us, what we try and do is structure our camp so that if a meltdown does happen, our staff know, our like frontline staff, our staff that do, you know, have to be in the most places, have a skill set that isn't that they know maybe how to totally de-escalate the situation and move from like meltdown to magical, everything's better and the world is beautiful and we're smelling flowers and eating cake. Although a lot of times cake would solve a lot of meltdowns. But what they do is they know how to react to that situation and not make it worse, and know where to get help. And then we, you know, how do we set up our logistics behind the scenes where we can bring help if a meltdown occurs? Because if we can lower the number of meltdowns by illuminating the hidden curriculum and build a system that lets most of our staff kind of be like the EMS people, like they know how to just like stabilize the situation and get the right person, then all of our staff don't have to be as skilled as maybe you all will be at working through this stuff, right? You probably have similar systems, but I think it's easier. It's why we don't have to have the same like level of training for all of our staff as maybe like a wilderness therapy kind of situation. Like the people there, they need to know how to deal with as extreme a situation as possible because you can't get anybody else there. That's who you got, right? Our camps, at least my camp, is not set up that way. Like I can get to most situations most of the time, or somebody else on our leadership team can get there. So what we try and do is help our staff in that setting. And that's where I think the big takeaways can be. And I don't know about you, but when I lose my cool and get all upset, the thing that I want the most in the world is for everyone to just leave me alone. I want to like huff out of the room, slam the door, say a few choice words that I'm going to regret later. And then I want to like go do something else. Maybe I want to listen to music. Maybe I go for a run. Maybe I just like go sit by myself. But I certainly don't want anyone to talk to me most of the time, right? And I certainly don't want someone I don't know that well to get like all up in my face, like, did you really want to make that choice? And I think like, unfortunately, that reaction that is what we often as, young, really well-intentioned 18, 20-year-old counselors, often that's their reaction is like, they want to make sure that kid's okay. They care about that kid. They want to help that kid learn a lesson. They want to, all these like really useful things. And in the moment, it's not helpful at all, right? Like they like follow them to where they're going, or they get too close to them and the kids like it keeps escalating. We ask them questions. Did you really mean to do that? And the kids kind of escalate instead of kind of being able to de-escalate. And so the first thing we try and help our staff do is give the kids in a meltdown situation a way to be safely melting down. And that's different in a million settings, right? You can do some preemptive stuff. Like you can have like cool down zones where you can put up like, this is a cool down zone and kids can just go there if they're kind of starting to lose their cool at basketball or whatever. You can always go to this corner of the gym, and that's like I'm just going to chill out corner, right? You can do some preemptive stuff, but a lot of times in the moment, you kind of have to react and kind of give the kids some reasonable choice options for where they can go, and let them do that, right? So how you do that with your staff is going to be a little different depending on your space, but helping them see that they can give kids choices on where they can go, what they can do during a meltdown, and then let them do their thing. So we had a kid that came to camp this last summer who had like ODD and oppositional defiance disorder and a bunch of these like diagnoses around basically when people tell him what to do, he loses his cool. And he's like 7 years old. And it quickly became apparent that he had the coping skills to find a spot and go there and then just like throw rocks. But at first we didn't know that. So, we had some staff that were like trying to like corral him, and eventually we called his mom and figured out what was going on, and that he had the skills to get to a spot, and he knew that he could go 20 feet from where everyone was, sit down, and he would just like throw rocks into the woods. And if we let him do that, like if we let him have his meltdown for a second, go to the spot, throw some rocks in the woods, then he would regain his cool, and then we could kind of start to move forward from there. But if we kind of kept trying to talk to him, and I'm talking about this, we talked to our staff about this, it didn't mean that we did it right every time, right? If we kept talking to him, he would just keep going further and further and further, and kind of make it worse. So how do we give our staff the skills to let the person who's upset have space to be upset and not talk to them, right? And that's really hard, because when I was a counselor, when I was 18, I had so much pride wrapped up in my ability to make sure that my group was doing well, right? And so if I had a kid who was like yelling and screaming and throwing his rocks into the woods, I felt like I had done something really wrong. And with this kid that I'm talking about in particular, let's call him James, like James just melted down sometimes, and then he was cool, and he could get back into the activities, and he could do a lot of things. And it wasn't, whatever, Devin's fault, because he was the leader of that group, that James was melting down. He just like had some meltdowns sometimes. So I think our staff, most of our staff, I have a belief that most staff, 99% of staff who work at summer camp, are there because they like kids, they care about kids, they want to make a difference, they want to do a good job, and sometimes they just don't know how to. And sometimes they over try and fix things. So a big thing we can do is illuminate the hidden curriculum for our staff to say, it's okay for kids to be upset, and this is how it's okay. And that's a little different for every camp, but they can go into this space, they can whatever. And in my experience, other kids know what meltdowns are like, but giving the staff a script for how to talk to the rest of the group takes a lot of that anxiety down. So when James is melting down at the Gaga pit, and he leaves the Gaga pit and he's going and throwing rocks into the woods, being able to, as an 18-year-old, look at the kids that are still playing Gaga, and they're kind of like, dude, what's going on? And be able to say, yeah, dude, James has got really big feelings right now. Have you ever been like upset and like said stuff you didn't want to say? I think James is just working through that. We're going to, Ryan's going to be with him. We're going to get through it. You guys want to play some Gaga? Most of the time the kids are like, yeah, dude, I want to play Gaga. Like, I don't care at all about what's going on over there, because Gaga is more fun than talking about my feelings for some people. But giving them some kind of script, giving them some kind of, this is the reaction that we're going to have with the rest of the group, and this is the reaction we're going to have with someone who's upset or who's having a meltdown. And helping the staff in that situation also know those kind of things, and giving them permission to react in that way, so that Ryan and I can look at each other and say, Ryan, you're with James, I've got Gaga, and we're good. Like, then essentially from there, we just keep doing our thing. Ryan goes and maybe he sits near James, lets James do his thing, walkies for somebody to help, or whatever the other system is at your camp to get some help to that space, so that Ryan then can either get out of the way or be a part of helping James work through the kind of next steps. I think that the key there for staff is to realize the difference between inconvenient meltdowns and dangerous meltdowns. An inconvenient meltdown is the one I just described about James, where he's upset, he removes himself, but it's fine. There's nothing, there's no danger really. If he started throwing rocks into the Gaga pit, that's a different story. But most of the time, kids can be redirected away from that. If you're like, dude, like, you can throw rocks that direction, but we got to make sure the kids stay safe. Like, in my experience, the huge majority of kids are happy to do that. And then there's dangerous meltdowns where you have and you all can have different policies around this and get different people trained in restraint or those kind of things. And that's kind of outside the scope of this, like, 4 hours of us hanging out together. But if it's a dangerous meltdown, it's a different story, right? If Jessica is hitting people and we need to stop that, that's a different conversation than if Jessica is storming off and kind of yelling curse words. Like, do I want my kids running around camp just screaming F words? Certainly not. Is it the end of the world? Also certainly not. From our camp. And maybe that's, maybe you've got donors that are always walking around and it shuts your camp down if kids curse. I don't think so. I think most places are totally, like, not okay with cursing, but like, that cursing is just a thing that happens. We can work through it, as opposed to if kids are really dangerously hurting each other, or, we've worked with some kids who have sprinted away from the group and always tried to go swimming. Like, that can be dangerous. That's a different strategy than being upset, right? And then I think the last thing is we tend to want, as people that work with kids, we want to be teachers. We want to help kids kind of get better at working through these big feelings. And I think our staff do too. I think our 18-year-old staff really want to help our 20-year-old staff. I'm picking on 18-year-olds. I love 18-year-olds. I think they're great at a lot of things. I also think they haven't been on the planet as long as most of us. So they maybe don't know as many things. But I think they really want to help too. And so then the conversation after a meltdown is a little bit, that's where things are a little bit more tricky and interesting. How do we help James reintegrate back with the group? How do we protect the rest of the group? And how do we help James kind of like learn useful skills to move forward? And I think that's challenging and tricky and different in every situation. But I think our natural reaction, or the most common reaction from most counselors, is to kind of over talk about it as soon as the kid finally is calm enough to have a conversation. And I want to say that I want to give you permission to not always have that conversation right then. And that sometimes the best thing, and I think most of the time actually, the best time to have a conversation is later. And to let the kid go back and play. Let them enjoy whatever's happening. And then if you're walking to the playground later, be like, yo, James, dude, seemed like you had a tough morning. What happened there? And have that conversation as you're walking. You know, hey, I noticed that when you're playing Gaga, if a kid gets you out, you can't keep your hands to yourself. What do you think we should do about that? Give your staff permission to come back to that conversation, unless the conversation needs to be had for that camper or other campers to be safe, right? So if that's the case, we have to make some agreements then and there so that the kids can re-participate without putting anybody at danger, because our job is to keep people safe, right? And I think that typically that talk that we're having afterward really is illuminating the hidden curriculum for them in a way that they don't understand. So like we have kids that I keep referencing Gaga. Gaga, if you don't have Gaga, is like a dodgeball game where you hit the ball and it's all kind of like below people's waist. And if you get hit by the ball, then you're out. And it's a huge place of conflict at camp because it's kind of like dodgeball. Dodgeball's scary, right? But all the time, and I'm going to generalize here, it's not always this way, but it's overwhelmingly the case, that are like 8-year-old boys think that every time they get out in Gaga, it's because somebody is targeting them and that they are like, that everyone's ganging up on them. And the conversation isn't about Gaga at all. It's about them not feeling connected to the group, or them not feeling like they're able to have like competence in a space. And so they get really upset, not because they're out in Gaga. Most of them don't care about like getting out and playing Gaga again. What they care about is that they feel less than, or they feel like they're not a part of the group. And so helping them like understand the hidden curriculum around Gaga is that people are hitting the ball and you get out, and that's okay. And it's not because people are picking on you, is like a huge step that sometimes takes years for our 8-year-olds to turn into 10-year-olds to finally figure that out. And sometimes we can help them see that, right? But that's true in the dining hall. If there's too much noise going on in the dining hall, we can illuminate the hidden curriculum for them that it's okay to wear noise canceling headphones, or maybe it's okay to eat on the porch where it's a little bit quieter. Maybe it's not. It depends on a million things about your camp, but helping them learn how to navigate a space is usually the way that we give that talk after a big meltdown. And maybe that can happen right away, or maybe we can wait some time before we have to eliminate that. Okay, I just talked for like a long time. What are some things that you heard that you were like, yes, I really appreciate that. It's the first time I've heard that. Or yes, I really appreciate that. I always am telling my staff that.
So this goes along the lines of what I've been encouraging my staff with. We're in the middle of returning team interviews. And so we've kind of coined this summer a no assumption summer. We have a lot of traditions that people come into thinking that, oh, we're going to play just because we play. So Gaga is the perfect example. We have 2 courts, well, whatever you want to call it, built into our property. It's a skill that we offer that, you know, is high energy, especially for our boys. And they find every reason to either get injured or feel attacked. And so that and 9 Square are probably the 2 biggest things where people just run and start playing and don't explain what's going on. So they fight about rules the entire time. And it is so competitive that a child who's never played before feels like an outcast in that situation. And so the idea of allowing the campers to be a part of the conversation and allowing them to explain the rules ahead of time and make it this inviting environment in everything that we do, with things as aggressive as sports and with things as calm as, you know, crafts. And we have like a praise time. So all of those is important, you know, the high energy stuff and the lower energy stuff, so that kids can know what's going on and feel included. Because I 100% agree that like most of our meltdowns happen when that high energy happens with no explanation in between. And so that's always super important.
We have, at my camp, we've got middle school and high school students, and mostly neurotypical. So most of our meltdowns really probably look more like anxiety or just like excessive crying or not talking or, you know, things like that. But what resonated with me, Jack, is what you said about giving the staff a script, because I feel like the staff know what to do with that camper who's having the problem. But when it's happening in a group setting, they really struggle with like, how am I going to move the group and help this camper at the same time. And we don't have co-counselors, although we do have kind of extra counselors. So for a group of 6 cabins, we have like 8 or 9 staff members, for example. So they have like an extra person, but giving them actually like words to say of like, here's an example of what you're going to say when you need to do the next thing, I think was something I hadn't thought about explicitly before. And I think that'll be really helpful.
Okay. So gotta look at my script, see if I forgot anything here. I think that one of the I think there's 2 things that are really hard about meltdowns in the moment. And one is that when someone is crying, refusing to talk to you, screaming, running away, hitting things, it's natural for everyone around to like also like have a increased level of like anxiety, right? Like when people are like yelling or screaming or whatever, like all of a sudden like I'm more tense. I'm like, okay, this is an emergency. And then we don't think as straight. I don't think as straight because I've got like all this like stuff going on. And I think often we know the easiest way to solve that. If you like, when an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 15-year-old, whoever is upset, as the outsider, it's like almost always pretty easy to know like what 3 lines they could say to make it easier for them in the future with their group, right? Like I know from being on the planet for 31 years that like if you just apologize to someone, it usually makes things better. You know? Like if I yell and scream and then whatever and I'm like, yo, Ryan, sorry, dude, like I didn't mean to, I got overwhelmed, blah, 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 blah. Like I know that works. Sometimes I mean it, but I know that strategy like works to get me out of trouble. So I think that with kids, we often like feel like we know that there's a secret code for them to get out of whatever they're doing. And sometimes we're like waiting, like maybe not y'all, but sometimes I'm like waiting for it. I'm like, Ryan, you just got to say you're sorry, or you just got to say like, dude, I was overwhelmed, or you just got to say, you say one of those things, and usually all of a sudden I like click, and I'm like, woo, all right, buddy, like you got it, let's go, you know. And I think especially for kids who maybe don't see the world the same way that I see the world, which is every kid, by the way. If we give them some of those lines in a way that is kind of like empathetic and not kind of demanding, I think we can help them build some skills without the kind of like the way that I think some grown-ups, and probably none of you, but some grown-ups are like, you should go apologize to Jessica. That'll make it. Go shake his hand and say you're sorry. Like, I don't, maybe, but if we kind of give them that script in a different way, I think we can often set them up for success. So like we could say, yo, Ryan, if you're feeling bad about what happened earlier with Jessica, one thing you could do is just apologize to her. And then it's like his choice. He can apologize to her or not. But we can offer up some of these scripts to kids, because a lot of times they just don't know. They don't know how to get themselves out of whatever kind of box they've painted themselves into. And I think that there's a huge difference between saying, Ryan, go apologize to Jessica, and Ryan, if you're feeling bad, here are some things you can do. And I think the kids see that too. And then I think that the other thing that is really hard about Meltdowns is similar to that. And it often they're interlocked, but it's how does that upset camper get back into the group or back into the flow of the day in a way that feels good to them and feels good to the group and feels good to you. And that one is is different for every situation. But I think one of the things that we can help our staff or the people, whoever ends up being the one that's kind of like there to help de-escalate the conflict or the meltdown, give some options for kids is similar. Like, so Ryan, it seems like you're like starting to calm down. Like, I really want to make sure we talk about this, but we can talk about it later. Do you want to go play Gaga again? Do you want to wait and we can hang out until lunch? You know, giving some kids those options on prepping them for how they can re-enter into camp. And sometimes that means some kind of conversation with a larger group. Like if Ryan has been hitting people, I'm not usually comfortable just like being like, all right, Ryan, like you're back in the group now, dude, like ready to roll. Even if Ryan and I come to an understanding and I feel really comfortable that Ryan isn't going to hit anybody again, I still feel like I've got something to do with the rest of the group. And so how do I set Ryan up and the group up to be able to have those kind of conversations? And I think that can be done in a million different ways, but helping our staff see that that is a problem that needs to be solved, I think helps them be successful when doing so. So questions like, Ryan, I know you were upset earlier, and I know you want to go play Gaga again, and I want you to too. Do you want to tell the rest of the group that, you know, you were overwhelmed and that's why this happened and you want to say these things? Or do you want me to let them know that, you know, this is what's going on and then you can play again? I can do it or you can do it, your call. You know, those kinds of conversations, depending on the situation, those kinds of conversations with kids to help them get set back up to be a part of the group. Or sometimes you don't have to have a conversation with the rest of the group. Certainly. I don't mean to say that the whole group needs to hear every detail of your conversation when someone is upset. But how do we set our staff up to, one, give the kids the tools and the lines or the conversation pieces to talk to other kids and to other people, after they've melted down, and 2, how do we help the group and the kid kind of come back together as a whole unit when something's going on. Cool. And I think those are 2 things that I always forgot when even when I like felt like I got this stuff. It's like, I like started to feel like I could get somehow meltdowns work. I still forgot the dismount. I was like, yeah, kid's like feeling good. We're chilling. And now there's 20 other kids that he's supposed to be hanging out with. I forgot that they were upset too. What the heck do I do? So helping our staff kind of see that as an option too. Cool. Okay, this is what I want to do. I want to do our little, well, first of all, does anyone have any questions or thoughts about that before we move on? Cool. Okay, this is what I want to do. I want to do our little 10 seconds and then we write things in the chat game that we've played before. So if you haven't played it, this is how it works. I'm going to ask a question. The question is going to be, we're transitioning into how to move forward with these ideas more than kind of new ideas, because we've only got 20 minutes of time together left. So the question is, what is 1 or 2 of the ideas, big or small, that you feel like you can put into practice this summer or this spring if you're running camps year round or during spring break camps? So an idea or thought that you can put into practice this summer, and I want to push you to not just write the hidden curriculum, push it a little bit further than that. And I'm going to give you 10 seconds, and then we're all going to post it at the same time. So you can type, but you can't post. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Send it. Coping bandwidth. Oh, I like that. Teach staff how to let kids cool down before grilling them. Cool down zones. Rule signs around camp. Love that. Helping kids reintegrate. Training summer camp staff for tools to handle meltdowns. Videos to fam. Videos to fam to help hidden curriculum on the first day. Talking to former staff members who are people of color about their experience to help better serve other people of color. Giving locations at camp their own safe down. I love that. Okay, so some of those things I feel like you can probably just do, and you don't need anybody else on board to make them work, right? But some of them you need, I can post orange signs that say cool down zone, but if nobody else understands how they work, it's like, cool, Jack. Nobody cares. And I do that at our camp way too much, where I think I have this awesome idea, I get nobody on board, and then I roll it out and nothing good happens, and I'm like, well, I had, it's so easy, but I don't get anyone on board, right? So what are some struggles, and we can have this conversation maybe as out loud conversation. What are some struggles that you all are thinking about as you think about trying to implement some of the stuff that you put in the chat?
How to use our training time efficiently. We have 2 weeks of training time with our camp staff, and there's a lot of protocol zoo-like things that we have to do. And then there's also a lot of teaching them about inclusion at a baseline level, and then trying to implement these new concepts as well. So trying to be efficient with our time.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, how many people feel like they struggle to fit everything into staff training that they want to cover? Yeah, me too, every year, always. I totally agree. Other things.
I also struggle with kind of just the sheer size of our camps. I've got about 160 or so cabin counselors. And so making sure that the information that I am giving them in training is actually going to be implemented on the ground when they're talking to the kids. And we do a lot of intentional community building and setup that's already like really specifically, directed to the counselors and how they're going to do it. But anytime I introduce like new concepts, I'm just very nervous about, is it really going to happen? Is it going to trickle down? How am I going to make that happen?
Yeah, totally. I feel that. And I also feel like in that same zone, I get too excited sometimes about an idea. And then I'm just like a fire hose of that, instead of like, yeah, I'm like, this is, it's going to be 100% this way tomorrow. And it's just like never has. Always, everyone just looks at me like, Jack, what are you talking about? It's way too much right now. I totally feel that.
Yeah, on that same note, I want to make our training a little bit more interactive, just because, especially last year, it was essentially lecture style or like them completing things for programming. There wasn't really much of in between. And so making all of our trainings interactive. So I was a teacher before I was a program coordinator. And so, interactive lesson plans is always what they're pushing in education. But in order to make that happen, you have to plan a whole lot more. And so hopefully by being this far out and focusing on it and not waiting up until the month before, we can make some of those things become more of a reality, because hopefully by them interacting more with the content, they'll take it home with them rather than just listening to someone talking to them for an hour where only, if I'm lucky, 25% of the room walks away with the information.
Yeah, right on. I love that one. So we're on the journey for this. So I don't want to pretend that we have the answers to this question, but at Stomping Ground, we have been trying for the last few years to bring a lot more of the hidden curriculum conversation into things, and a lot more restorative practices or like restorative justice stuff into camp. And we somehow, what I'm going to say is going to sound so basic, and it took us 5 years to figure out that this was going to work better. But last year we just made like what I called like the Hitty Cricks meetings a part of what we were doing. So every time something started, we would be like, all right, we're just like Hitty Cricks real quick. And we would like point things out. And then we just built into staff training, like check-in circles, which is part of restorative practices, which we did with kids. Like we did check-in circles with kids, and we like asked staff to illuminate the hidden curriculum with kids, but we just like weren't doing, like we were taking it for granted with our staff. And so and it worked a lot better for us. And, it was just made, it normalized the language in a way that I think really helped us, even if staff weren't totally getting always how to illuminate the hidden curriculum in this space, or they were missing this detail, or their check-in circles weren't quite the way I would have run them. It normalized the conversation in a way that kind of had this, it was blended into what we were doing, because if we were illuminating the hidden curriculum around archery, we were also then being able to like lead the conversation around everything that was about archery. But it's just like, we would be like, all right, yeah, like this is the Hitty Cricks around this. And then also this is where the bows are, and this is all the things you teach at archery. And then the same with, this is unrelated totally to inclusion, but kind of it's related, I think, in that like our check-in circles, we were able to use the check-in circle as a tool to then recap what maybe happened earlier in the day, but it just normalized that. So what I'm, again, like so basic, but took us 5 years to actually do. So, but I think what I learned from that, and what I'm going to keep trying to do moving forward, is finding ways to use like the tools of big concepts in more of the different trainings, so that it's not so much like, okay, we're learning policies and procedures here, and we're learning conflict resolution here, and we're learning homesickness here. It's the hidden curriculum is going to infiltrate all of that, and we can talk about it that way. And that, I mean, we went like way overboard on the hidden curriculum at our camp. We thought it was could be a huge piece of making our program take a step forward. And that may not be what you all choose this year. We've, like I said, we've had Sil come to camp 4 or 5 years. And so, but it really helped us to take that step forward. And if your camp is anything like mine, your staff might not like the term hidden curriculum, because my staff generally are ready to be done with school during the summer. And so hidden curriculum sounds very schooly. And so when one of our very kind of like cool, a lot of social capital style staff started calling it the Hiddy Cricks, it also shifted for us, because then it was like, oh, like the Hiddy Cricks is cool. Like hidden curriculum. Oh, Jack wants us to like teach kids stuff, which was kind of different for us.
Yeah, I've coined the summer no assumption summer, which I'm encouraging my staff that they explain everything before they do it. So something as simple as, we eat family style, so you explain what that is before you do it. And my hope is that we're then describing the hidden curriculums without even claiming them as hidden curriculums. And to your point, we give out team manuals, which has been the same team manual since I was a camp counselor 10 years ago. And it's a stack of like 40 pages that I'm lucky if my counselors look at. And so I'm wanting to make that more interactive and like an interactive notebook almost. But how do I coin that phrase without it sounding schooly is definitely where I'm at right now. So
I love that. I love no assumptions, Summer. That's great.
We have a challenge at our camp. It's been around for 38 years, and some of our staff who've been there for many, many years also grew up there and started going as campers, and so there's definitely this sort of family feeling to it. And so all of this culture and tradition, that's at every camp, is so ingrained that these people have lived it for 20 years in their lives or something. And so there is a strong divide between what I would consider those people who grew up at our camp, and then of course new staff or new campers coming in. And so it's always this balance in training to not be insulting to, or seem insulting to the staff that know everything, but provide and illuminate all of that hidden curriculum to the new staff coming in, and to help them feel welcome and included. And just really helping the longtime veteran staff shift their perspective to see how exclusive they're actually being in holding on so tightly to those traditions and not wanting to have any change. I find it's a constant struggle to sort of balance those two sort of opposing viewpoints.
How many people feel like they've got this strong culture that the like alumni returning staff all are holding on to, and then this like conflict with the new staff where it's like this tug of war between that, right? We have that. This is our 6th summer. We have that. I feel that so much. And I think you're right that it's like respecting that culture is awesome. Some of those traditions are probably so cool. Like, and as a new person, it's overwhelming as heck to know, like, nobody said you're not supposed to talk in the dining hall on Wednesdays. And the way that, Thursday breakfast works, it's like, what? Like, none of this stuff makes any sense. And it's so cool, right? Like, I visited Rose College in Missouri, and there's just a big emblem on the floor of their library that there's like tradition is if you walk over it, you're not going to graduate from the college. And so all the students like walk around the outside, but the faculty walk over the top of it. It's just the tradition that's there, right? It's cool. I don't know. Like, it's like a cool thing. I'm not gonna do it at my camp. We don't do graduation or whatever, but like, it's kind of a cool thing. But it's also like, if you're a new person and no one tells you that, you're like, what? I don't know. And so the problem for us is always, how do we help our like returning staff not feel like we're taking away from their awesome traditions, but give them some empathy for the new folks who are trying to figure out all of that stuff. And that's always different every year, and it's challenging. But I think it kind of comes back to what I want the next step to be, which is to think about who is one person, not a lot of people. And maybe you are better than me and you can do like a lot of people and convince a lot of people of things. Usually when this time of year, especially, I'm already like running around like a chicken with my head cut off trying to get things done. But who's one person that I can get on board with what I want to make happen this summer in a direction? So you don't have to go from, never having talked about inclusion to, a camp like Camp for All in Texas that like is barrier free. Like, I'm not going to get there this summer, right? But how do we get one person on board with moving forward in a direction and have that person be the right person, that they're a linchpin in what we're trying to do? And so for some people that might be the executive director, the owner, the whatever, and we need them to get on board, because if we can bring Culture City to camp for X number of dollars, we can make some big strides. Maybe you're the person who has control of the purse strings, but you aren't the person who can shift the staff culture, but you can get, Steve, the coolest counselor, on board with an idea to try and move it in that direction. But I want us all to think about, and then maybe write down this person's name. Who is the person, the one person who can move the needle a little bit for us? I mean, in an ideal world, we can get, all 100 staff, 10 staff, whatever number of staff we have, all like super invested into an idea that we have. But if we can get one more person to buy into it, then we can then it becomes like a problem set that's like, okay, I just need to convince Devin that the hidden curriculum is important. And I don't know how I'm going to do that yet, but that's like for me, that's like a more reasonable problem. And I believe that Devin is like one of the cool counselors who will shift the culture if he buys into it. And so if that's the case, then I have a problem set. I get Devin to help me run the training. Maybe I call him, maybe we go out to pizza. Maybe I take Devin to a place that he's like uncomfortable. Like maybe Devin's like a super sports guy, but he trusts me enough that he'll go to a dance class with me and he'll be like super overwhelmed and be like, I don't know, and then it's like, oh, let's debrief this a little bit. So like, yeah, it was like overwhelming to be in a place that you've never been before. That's like how it is for new staff when they come to camp. And I can't take every one of my staff to a dance class, but I maybe could take Devin, and that might, it's a bet I'm making. Like everything that we do at camp is like, we're hoping that something's going to happen because we're in the people business, not the like, I don't know, spend $1 and make $2 business. Maybe you can do that. I can't. But who's one person that I can convince of one idea that I can move forward, that I think can move our culture forward a little bit? Cool. Does anyone want to share the name of the person? Doesn't matter because we don't know your camp, but the the character of the person that you chose and what you're hoping that they'll learn, or that they'll agree with you on, I guess, maybe not learn.
So I actually have our camp nurse. She grew up at Willowbrook. She started when she was 3. Her mom taught at Willowbrook. And she went through and was, our junior counselor, senior counselor, and specialist and everything, and went away and lived her life and then came back, and now she's our camp nurse. And so she's incredibly, and her daughter, who's now 3, goes to camp. So she's incredibly, obviously passionate about the traditions and the family of Willowbrook. But the camp, her tent, the nursing tent, is where all the staff go to hang out. And so I think immediately, and she's just this big, she's got all this energy, right? And everybody loves her and everybody confides in her. So I think immediately she's like the #1 person that could spread the word throughout all of our different areas of camp, because whether it's the 3 and 4 year old area, or the 5 to 7 year old, or the 8 to 18, she interacts with all of them. So
I love that.
I actually picked one of my unit directors. So we have like our counselors, and we have our unit directors above them, and then we have like our admin team. And so one of our unit directors, this is third year as part of that team. And so he's kind of it's not a big enough deal that I'm going to call the admin team, but I'm going to ask him, kind of in that position, and everyone really respects him. And so I think, I don't think it would be a stretch, but I think kind of talking to him about the importance of these things and like what we're modeling for the staff, I think he ends up being one of the kind of go-to people when they're not really ready to talk to admin about it. And I think that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you all so much for spending the last 4 weeks with us. You can always email me or Sil anytime or call us. I'm sure all that stuff is on the internet somehow, or you can just respond to my email at some point. But I'm Jack at thesummercampsociety.com if you need anything. And I want to say, let's use the Facebook group that we've got. If you find cool articles, if you have questions, if you find videos, if you start using like Culture City or if you start using a different service that like you find really helpful, let's share some of this stuff. I think that the people that are self-selecting and invite, you can, the inclusion Facebook group doesn't have to be just for people that have done like this stuff. Like, I think that the goal would be, if we're the self-selecting to be the kinds of people who want camp to be more inclusive for more people, let's share our resources, bring the people together that want to do that, and let's push everybody forward. Let's do it for camps all over the country, the world, whatever, because the more we share with each other, the better we're all going to be, and the more kids are going to come to camp. And to me, I think you all are going to run really awesome programs, and I hope that more kids get to go to camps like the ones you all run, and that all of our camps can get a little bit better. So I want to say, I know it's going to be challenging this summer doing this and the 1,000 other million things that you have to do to make camp work, but y'all are incredible, and it's going to be a great summer, and your kids are going to really appreciate it. And most of them probably won't tell you that, but you're making a huge impact on huge numbers of kids this summer. So I already love what you're doing, and thank you for being here. I'll post this video also in the Facebook group if you want to watch it again later. You all are the best. Have a great summer.